starting at that helicopter level, my take on one of the things that's probably occupying a lot of our time is just this whole issue of every asset in the world looking pretty expensive versus traditional measures. It's pretty unusual to be in a situation where it doesn't matter whether it's property, equities, most things are looking pretty fully priced versus history, and that's a conundrum for most of us. This chart on the left I find interesting because you look at that and say, okay, well, Australian stocks on that measure look like they're pretty expensive versus bonds, but you look at the chart on the right and do exactly the same measure versus gold and stocks look cheap. What do I take from that? Well, to me, I think one of the biggest issues we're debating at the moment is the whole issue of government bonds being a risk-free asset. And are people starting to question that? And is one of the reasons why a lot of other assets are perhaps a little more expensive than we're used to, because people are questioning whether government bonds should fill the role that they used to. And we think there are some pretty good arguments, and I'll touch on a couple of reasons why. This chart here, and again, one of the reasons that we'd agree with Seb and say it looks to us like there's a fair bit of regime shift happening, is those charts on the left just show you the budget deficit surplus positions of Australia and the US. And to be fair, Australia looks okay versus most of the world, but we have had fantastic commodity prices, strong terms of trade, etc. And even with that though, you look at the picture and say, well, you want to be a perpetual optimist to believe that the future looks like one where we're not going to have deficits nearly every year. We've had a budget a couple of weeks ago. The government are in general have more and more demands on their spending, and the propensity to be able to raise taxes is just zero. Every time that any government around the world is trying to increase taxes, they're struggling. Interestingly, the chart on the right suggests to us that one of the reasons why the government has to have a bigger role as a spender in the economy is because the consumer's tapped out. My 30-second view of what's happened in the last 20 years is basically we spent most of it outsourcing manufacturing to China. That made prices of nearly all goods look flat to down. We used that as a justification to cut interest rates, and we used those lower interest rates to pump it into residential property. And we're left with a lot of debt against residential property and a fair bit of intergenerational inequity because the young people have got all the debt and the old people have got all the assets. That creates a bit of a problem because it's hard to find a credit-worthy borrower for a bank to lend more money to at the moment. Nearly everyone who is young and trying to take on debt has as much as they can afford. It's very hard for the banks to throw more debt at them. That is one reason why we think the government's going to have to play a bigger role in putting money into the economy, because nearly all modern economies are very dependent on asset prices. They're very dependent on psychology and having consumers believe that the future looks bright. And with the inability of consumers to take on that role, governments are going to fill more of it. So it's, again, a bit of a regime shift going on in that regard.